We bow our heads before meals. We pray before exams, in hospital rooms, at funerals, across every culture, every continent, every century. The act is the same. Hands folded, eyes closed. A whispered hope sent upward to someone or something unseen. From the deserts of ancient prophets to the pews of modern cathedrals, we've been told that prayer changes things, that it bends reality, that it moves the hand of the divine. When everything else fails, when medicine runs out, when logic falls silent, when we reach the edge of control, we turn to prayer. Because prayer promises what nothing else can, that the universe is listening, that we are not alone. Every faith carries the same heartbeat. The Buddhists chant, the Muslims salah, the Christians folded hands, the whispered mantra of the Hindu. Different languages, different gods, but the same plea, please, help me. Prayer is humanity's oldest technology of hope. The idea that thoughts can ripple through reality, that words can rearrange destiny. And for countless people, it brings real comfort, a quiet in the storm, a feeling of connection, a sense that someone cares. But comfort is not confirmation. Feeling heard is not the same as being answered. So here's the question few dare to ask. What happens when we test it? If prayer truly connects us to infinite power, if it can heal the sick, change the course of events, or open doors closed by circumstance, then that power shouldn't vanish the moment we measure it. In fact, it should be the easiest thing in the world to verify. A direct line to omnipotence shouldn't require excuses. And yet, under even the simplest tests, it fails. Again, and again, and again. So maybe the real mystery of prayer isn't why it sometimes works. It's why we keep believing it does, even when all the evidence points to silence. Because maybe what prayer reveals is not the power of a God, but the power of belief itself. And that is where our journey begins. Before we can test prayer, we have to be honest about what it claims to do. Because prayer isn't presented as a simple ritual. It's not sold as meditation. It's presented as power. Power that reaches beyond the human mind, into the fabric of reality itself. Ask any believer, and the promises are clear. Prayer heals the sick. It changes outcomes. It opens doors that logic can't. It's divine intervention, on demand. A child with cancer, a soldier in battle, a family in crisis. We are told that prayer can move mountains, that if the words are sincere enough, if the faith is strong enough, something, somewhere, will shift. That's the first claim, that prayer changes events, that it alters what would have happened without it. The second claim is more personal. Prayer, we're told, brings guidance, direction, answers to questions that reason can't touch. In the dark, when no one is listening, you'll hear that still small voice, God's whisper, a divine nudge steering your choices. And finally, prayer promises transformation, not just of circumstance, but of the self. It's said to calm the heart, mend the soul, and replace fear with peace. 3 levels of promise: physical, external, internal. But here's the problem. Those last ones, the feelings of peace, relief, comfort, they're real. No one denies that. But feeling calm after prayer is not evidence of divine response. It's the mind's natural self-soothing mechanism. It's biology, chemistry, a feedback loop of focus and release. When you strip away the emotional comfort, the question becomes much simpler and much harder to dodge. Does prayer actually affect reality beyond psychological comfort? Does it heal the sick, change outcomes, intervene in the natural order of things? Because if it doesn't, if prayer only affects the one who prays, then it's not a conversation with the divine. It's a form of meditation. And that's fine, as long as we're honest about what it really is. So before we move forward, let's set the rule for this entire investigation. We are not testing how prayer makes us feel. We're testing what it does. Out there, in the world, where evidence speaks louder than faith. So, let's test it. Let's take prayer out of the sanctuary and into the lab. For decades, researchers have tried to answer one simple question. Does prayer work? Not metaphorically, not emotionally, but in measurable, physical terms. Can prayer heal? Can it speed recovery? Can it change outcomes that medicine alone cannot? To find out, scientists designed experiments as fair and as sincere as possible. No mockery, no cynicism, just careful observation. The most famous of these was called the GUSTEP Project, short for Study of the Therapeutic Effects of Intercessory Prayer. It was led by researchers at Harvard and several major hospitals. More than 800 patients undergoing heart surgery were included. They were divided into 3 groups. One group was prayed for and told so. One group was prayed for, but not told, and one group wasn't prayed for at all. The people doing the praying were committed believers, Catholic, Protestant, and others, who were given each patient's first name and a specific script for prayer. They prayed sincerely, daily, for weeks. The patients and doctors didn't know who was being prayed for. Neither did the families. It was double-blind. No bias, no placebo effect. If prayer truly connects us to divine intervention, this was its perfect chance to shine. But when the data came back, something unexpected happened. There was no difference between those prayed for and those who weren't. Recovery rates, complications, infections, all within the same margin of chance. In fact, in one of the strangest findings, the group that knew they were being prayed for actually had slightly more complications. Researchers suggested it might have been anxiety, that knowing you were the focus of a supernatural experiment added pressure to recover well. Imagine that. Prayer meant to heal, producing stress instead. Other studies tried to replicate the results. The Bird study, the Mayo Clinic trials, smaller hospital experiments around the world. Each one started with optimism. Each one ended the same way. No measurable effect beyond randomness. It didn't matter which religion prayed. It didn't matter how sincere the believers were. It didn't matter how many people joined in. The universe remained silent. And yet, if a God truly responds to faith, if the promise is that, ask and you shall receive, then measurable effects should exist. They should stand out clearly in the data. But they don't. Not once. Not anywhere. The results show nothing beyond chance. Now, at this point, the excuses begin. God doesn't like being tested. He refuses to perform on command. But pause for a moment and think about what that means. If sincerity matters, if the prayers were genuine, why would a sincere attempt to confirm his promises be treated as defiance? If truth is divine, why should honesty be punished? No loving being would condemn curiosity. Only systems built on fear need to avoid questions. You're told that prayer is a bridge to heaven. But the moment you ask to check its structure, you're warned not to look down. Don't shake it. Don't question it. Just walk. And if it collapses beneath your feet, you're told it's because you didn't believe hard enough. This is not how truth behaves. Truth invites inspection. It survives testing. It welcomes light. So when the most sincere prayers of thousands, measured, recorded, and repeated, produce no more change than random chance, maybe it's not faith being tested. Maybe it's the claim itself. And so, the first simple test leaves us with a quiet, sobering realization. For all the promises, for all the stories, for all the hope, prayer changes hearts, but not outcomes. The comfort is real. The evidence is not. If the data shows no measurable effect, then why do so many people still swear they've seen prayer work? The answer lies not in the heavens, but in the human mind. Because our brains are pattern-making machines. We're built to find meaning, to connect dots, even when they don't belong together. It's what psychologists call confirmation bias. We notice the hits and forget the misses. When we pray for something and it happens, we remember. We tell the story. We share it in church, in WhatsApp groups, at dinner tables. It becomes a testimony, proof that prayer works. But when we pray and nothing happens, we forget. We rationalize. We bury it under excuses. It wasn't God's will. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe I didn't pray hard enough. And slowly, the silence stops counting as evidence. Only the miracles remain in memory. Think about it. A mother prays for her child's recovery, and the child survives. It's a miracle. The story spreads. Her faith becomes stronger. Another mother prays just as sincerely, with the same tears, for the same disease. But her child dies. The story vanishes. The silence isn't spoken of again. We call one survival a miracle. We call the other tragedy. But both exist in the same statistical universe. When millions pray every day for jobs, for healing, for parking spaces, for rain, some of those wishes will inevitably line up with reality. It's simple probability. When enough dice are rolled, some will land on 6. And when they do, we don't see chance. We see purpose. Because the human mind craves agency. It's more comforting to believe someone heard us than to admit the universe just flipped a coin. To the believer, the silence is never evidence of absence. It's a test of faith. The failure becomes part of the narrative. It's not disproof. It's deepening. And so the system sustains itself. Every answered prayer reinforces the belief. Every unanswered one is reinterpreted to protect it. Over time, this creates a feedback loop, a psychological trap. The more prayer fails, the more it demands to be defended. The more silence you hear, the more you convince yourself that silence means something profound. It's a cycle that feeds on sincerity. Every unanswered prayer strengthens dependence, not doubt. And that's what makes the illusion so powerful. It's not built on deception. It's built on hope. Real, raw, human hope. But hope is not evidence. And sincerity is not proof. When you step back from the stories, from the emotion, the music, the testimonies, you begin to see the pattern. The same pattern gamblers fall into. Remembering the wins, forgetting the losses. That's not divine design. That's human psychology. And once you see it clearly, you can never unsee it again. Because the miracle wasn't in the event. It was in the interpretation. We made meaning out of coincidence and called it proof of God. But the moment you realize that, you also realize something deeper and far more unsettling. The power of prayer doesn't lie in its results. It lies in our refusal to measure them. When the evidence fails, the explanations begin. Theology has spent centuries building escape routes, beautiful, poetic detours designed to protect the idea of prayer from ever being cornered by reality. The first, and perhaps the most common, is the phrase we've all heard 1,000 times. God answers every prayer. Sometimes the answer is no. It sounds wise. It sounds humble. But listen closely, and it collapses on itself. If every possible outcome counts as an answered prayer, then the word answer loses meaning entirely. If healing means yes, death means no, and silence means wait, then there is no scenario where prayer can ever fail. It becomes bulletproof, not because it's true, but because it's unfalsifiable. And anything that can't be tested can't be trusted. If you flip a coin and call both sides heads, you'll always be right, but you'll never be honest. Then comes the second escape route. We can't understand God's plan. It's the theological trump card, a way to turn confusion into virtue. But if we truly can't understand His plan, then why claim to understand that He listens? Why claim to know what He wants, what He loves, or what He expects? You can't build an entire structure of moral commands on a being whose reasoning you simultaneously admit you can't comprehend. You can't declare that He hears every prayer, then hide behind mystery when He doesn't respond. Mystery is not a defense. It's a silence, painted gold. Then there's the third argument, the softest, most modern one. Prayer doesn't change God. It changes you. It's poetic, comforting, and absolutely true, in a different category. Because what that describes is not supernatural intercession. It's psychology. It's meditation. It's focus and reflection and calm. And there's nothing wrong with that. But let's be honest about what it is. When you say, prayer changes me, you're not describing divine communication. You're describing introspection. You're describing breathing, centering, stillness. The same effects achieved through mindfulness, through music, through a walk alone under the stars. And yet, believers often use that inner calm as proof of an external presence. The effect becomes the evidence. But cause and correlation are not the same thing. These escape routes all have one purpose: to move the goalposts, to shift the claim from something measurable to something safely vague. Prayer begins as a promise of action, a force that can heal, alter, and intervene. But when those promises fail the simplest tests, it retreats, first into mystery, then into metaphor, and finally into pure emotion. It stops being a claim about the world and becomes a claim about feelings. And that's the quiet transformation that keeps it alive. It's no longer about results. It's about reassurance. A belief that once promised power ends up offering poetry. And poetry cannot be proven wrong. But if that's all prayer truly is, a beautiful ritual for peace of mind, then let's call it that. Let's stop pretending it can move mountains. Because mountains don't move. We do. So if prayer doesn't change the world outside us, what does it change? The answer lies not in the heavens, but in the brain. Modern neuroscience has spent decades studying prayer and meditation, and what the scans reveal is remarkable. When people pray, the same regions light up again and again. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of focus and decision-making. The amygdala, which governs emotion, fear, and calm. the parietal lobes, which help you distinguish self from surroundings. During deep prayer, activity in these areas shifts. The prefrontal cortex lights up. The parietal lobes quiet down. That's why people describe feeling connected or one with the universe. Their sense of self literally softens. They feel immersed in something greater. But here's the key. These patterns are identical to what happens during meditation, deep breathing, or even immersive artistic focus. No matter what the believer's faith, the neural signature looks the same. There is no divine signal, no mysterious new brainwave that appears only when the supernatural answers back. What we see instead is a sophisticated form of self-regulation. The brain is calming itself, balancing chemistry, releasing tension, redirecting attention. It feels profound, because it is. But it's not otherworldly. It's human biology doing what it's designed to do. When you feel heard during prayer, that's the brain's dopamine on system at work. Feeling acknowledged, even by an imagined listener, activates reward pathways. It brings relief, a sense of order, a momentary illusion of control in chaos. That's also the Manning-Sear placebo effect. In motion, belief itself can trigger measurable changes, lower blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, even temporary boosts in immunity. Not because the belief is true, but because the mind's expectation changes how the body feels. It's the same reason a sugar pill can ease pain if you believe it's morphine. The brain doesn't just record experience, it creates it. So when prayer brings comfort, that comfort is real. The peace, the tears, the stillness, they're all real. But the source is not divine, it's internal. Prayer doesn't open a channel to the divine. It opens a feedback loop inside your own mind. A loop that says, I'm safe, I'm seen, I'm doing something. And in a world that often feels uncontrollable, that loop is powerful. It gives structure to uncertainty. It replaces helplessness with ritual. That's why people across every faith, every continent, every era describe the same sensations: peace, surrender, clarity, even when they're praying to entirely different gods. The system is the same, only the story changes. But this discovery doesn't diminish the experience. It reveals something beautiful about us, that the human brain, left to its own devices, already knows how to heal itself. We just gave that process a name and called it prayer. And once you understand that, the silence from above stops feeling cruel. It starts feeling natural. Because maybe the answer was never meant to come from the sky. Maybe it was always echoing from within. For all its comfort, for all its beauty and tradition, belief in prayer carries a cost. Because when faith becomes the substitute for action, it doesn't just fail to help, it can do real harm. There are stories too painful to tell, and yet too important to ignore. Parents who watch their children die, not because help wasn't available, but because they believed prayer alone would heal them. Children with diabetes denied insulin. Infants with infections left untreated. Their tiny coffins filled not by fate, but by faith. Every one of those parents prayed. Every one of them believed. And when the inevitable happened, they were told it was God's will. No court of law, no accountability, just silence, and the illusion that suffering was somehow sacred. Then there's the quieter kind of harm, the one that doesn't make headlines, but steals lives in slower ways. The televangelist on late-night TV promising miracle money. Send your seed of faith, he says, and watch God bless you 100-fold. Elderly widows mail their last savings, hoping heaven keeps receipts. The preachers get richer. The poor get poorer. And still, they pray. Because the moment you question it, you're told your doubt is the reason it didn't work. The guilt loops endlessly. The system feeds on sincerity. And then there's the collective harm, the one that shows up every time tragedy strikes. A school shooting, a flood, a famine. The headlines appear, and the first response is always the same. Thoughts and prayers. They sound compassionate, but too often they become the period at the end of a sentence that should have been a beginning. A ritual of empathy that replaces responsibility. Prayer becomes the balm we use to soothe our conscience while the world keeps burning. For every miracle claimed, there are countless graves filled by silence. For every healing story told on stage, there are 1,000 families grieving off camera. And still, we call it faith. Because to admit the failure would mean facing the truth, that prayer's comfort is bought at the price of inaction. When prayer replaces medicine, people die. When prayer replaces policy, injustice thrives. When prayer replaces evidence-based solutions, lives are lost, and accountability evaporates. The tragedy isn't that people pray, it's that they're told prayer is enough, that folding your hands is somehow equal to opening them. It's not. We live in a world where answers require hands, not halos. Effort, not incantations. Action, not appeals to the sky. Because while we wait for miracles, real solutions sit untouched. Science, medicine, compassion in motion, all sidelined by the illusion that someone else is handling it from above. Faith may comfort the heart, but it cannot mend a wound. Only hands can do that. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in all this, that the real miracle has never been prayer itself, but the courage to act when the heavens stay silent. In any honest search for truth, the rule is simple. The one making the claim carries the burden of proof. If prayer truly works, if it can heal, intervene, or alter reality, then the claim should carry evidence, not exceptions, not excuses. Evidence. That's how truth earns its place, not by being defended, but by being demonstrated. But in religion, that burden has been quietly reversed. When prayer works, God gets the glory. When it doesn't, you get the blame. The success belongs to heaven. The failure belongs to you. You didn't believe hard enough. You didn't pray long enough. You doubted. You sinned. You lacked faith. Imagine if science operated this way. If a scientist promised a cure, but every failure was blamed on the patient's doubt, we'd call it fraud, not faith. If a doctor said, "My medicine works perfectly, but only if you believe it does," we'd call that manipulation, not healing. And yet, when religion uses the same logic, we call it devotion. It's a system designed to be invincible, because no matter what happens, the answer always points back to belief. Every win confirms the claim. Every loss tests your loyalty. This isn't a pathway to truth. It's a circle, a loop with no exit. And inside that loop, faith becomes immune to accountability. The rules of reason are suspended. The responsibility, flipped. But truth doesn't fear questions. It doesn't need protection from scrutiny. If prayer were what it claims to be, its power would be visible, measurable, undeniable. It wouldn't need to hide behind mystery or turn silence into proof. Because in the end, a belief that only survives by blaming the believer isn't strength. It's self-preservation. And the moment you see that reversal clearly, the illusion cracks, the spell breaks, and what's left is the simple, honest rule we started with. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, not extraordinary excuses. People don't pray because they're stupid. They pray because they're human, because they crave hope, comfort, and a sense of control in a world that often feels utterly uncontrollable. When life collapses, when the diagnosis comes, when the night feels endless, people reach for something, anything. And prayer is the oldest reaching hand we know. There is beauty in that. There is tenderness, a shared ritual across all of humanity, an ancient heartbeat that whispers, I need help. I need meaning. I need to believe this pain isn't pointless. And for that, no one should be mocked. No one should be shamed. Because that impulse to cry out into the void is the most human thing of all. But here's the line we must learn to draw. There's a difference between psychological value and supernatural power. Between a practice that calms the mind and a claim that commands the universe, reflection has value, stillness has power. When we pause, when we breathe, focus, and gather our thoughts, we open the door to insight. That's not divine intervention. That's consciousness at work. The problem begins when that inner experience is mistaken for external confirmation. When a whisper from our own mind is mistaken for the voice of the divine. Prayer doesn't fail because God is cruel. It fails because it was never meant to succeed as a test of reality. It was never designed to change the world outside you. It was designed to change the world inside you. It's not a transaction. It's not a conversation. It's not proof of a listening sky. It's a mirror, not a microphone. When you speak into it, you hear your own voice reflected back, softened by faith, colored by hope, but still your own. And maybe that's what the silence has been saying all along. Maybe the reason nothing answers is because nothing needs to. Maybe the silence isn't rejection, it's revelation. A quiet truth that says, the meaning you seek isn't waiting in the clouds, it's waiting in you. If silence is all we ever hear, maybe it's time to stop waiting for a voice from the sky and start listening to the one inside. Because when you do, you might find something far more real than divine approval. You might find self-understanding, empathy, strength, clarity, the very qualities we once credited to prayer, but that were within us all along. And that realization changes everything. It doesn't destroy faith. It reclaims it. It brings it home, from heaven to humanity. So let me ask you something. What prayer did you once believe changed everything? And what happened when you looked closer? Because maybe the miracle wasn't out there. Maybe it was you.